because I said, I really would like you to do the talk so everyone gets to know you and you'll enjoy this. Because, you know, all of the things that we do, you know, in Science of Mind is that everything that we do, it's all spiritual. People don't realize that, but everything we do has a purpose. Everything that we experience helps us to grow and connect more deeply with the divine within us. And that's what we teach. So I'm going to welcome up Beecham, and his talk is called Mediumship, A Bridge to Comfort, Healing, and Peace. And you're going to talk a little bit about yourself, right? Okay, good. Because I don't need to go into all that. I'm going to let him do that. And the mic is on. So let's welcome up Beecham Parker.
How about now?
Right there. Well, and so we'll tighten it for you. You got it? Okay.
That's one thing. The technical thing, not mine. Okay. Yes. Surrender. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. And it's such a joy and honor to be here today with all of you, and I want to thank Reverend Maryum for making this possible. We hit it off when we saw each other, our eyes lit up, and we're like, oh, I know you. And so anyway, and the song that we just sang, that's what mediumship is about. That's what the bridge is it's our love. Because our love that we share with our loved ones truly is eternal. And it is by and through that love and grace of God, of Spirit, that this happens through me. But before I get into more of how mediumship is a bridge to comfort, healing, and peace, I'd like to share with you a little bit about my journey and how I got to this place of service and surrendering completely to Spirit. And I call this from childhood suppression to adult expression. Because what happened was early in my childhood, around the age of 5, I started seeing shadowy figures in my room, in my bedroom. And I grew up in the South, as you can tell by my accent. And what happened was nobody would believe me that I was seeing these shadowy figures in my room. And at that point in time, it was back in the 60s and 70s, that Dark Shadows was on. Who can remember Dark Shadows? Loved the Dark Shadows. Roxy, you love that too. Yes, all of you. So I'd run home from school to watch Dark Shadows. So when I would share with my sister and my parents that I had these experiences, they said, well, you're just watching too much Dark Shadows. So anyway, what happened was it became scary to me because I thought of them as ghosts and how Hollywood portrays them. And so it was at that time I was not actually communicating with them because I wasn't even understanding what was happening. So I shut it down. And so that was the childhood suppression. And what happens is when things scare us, and I'm sure some of you have had some defense mechanisms created. Who's had a defense mechanism created that no longer serves us as we move along into our adult years? And so I shut down the abilities to sense the spirit people, as I call them now, until I started having some experiences in seeing them with my physical sight. I saw my great-grandfather, and he was semi-solid, he was somewhat transparent, and that was in college, and I saw some other spirit people as well. And so then the defense mechanism came back up again. it wasn't until I was getting my master's in spiritual psychology at the University of Santa Monica, as we call us USMers, and we would engage in these deep emotional healing processes and skills that they taught us. And what ended up happening was we would get in trios, and you would have the opportunity to be the counselor, the client, and the neutral observer. And what happened was I started giving information about people's families, but they were all dead. And so I was like, okay, something strange is happening here. And so at that time I was also watching, and by the way, they're not dead. We're not dead. The body's dead. That's all that's dead. Okay? So I was watching, crossing over with John Edward at that time. And I had the great opportunity and honor to stand up and be called on and to thank him for opening the door, by the way, for all of us mediums to come out of the closet.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I started realizing that there was something that was out of the ordinary, or so I thought the ordinary. And I was realizing that I was having my own experiences again. And so these abilities that God gave me, we all have these abilities. It's the level of our awareness of these abilities that differs. And mine was heightened, and I suppressed it. But then it became very clear as I was working through my master's in spiritual psychology that it was necessary to embrace them again. And I would watch Crossing Over with John Edward, and at the end of his program, I would become emotional each time when he would say, all right, everybody, on the count of 3, and everybody would say, "Ah," because they didn't get messages. And so tears poured down my face, and at that time I really wasn't consciously aware of the extent of the passion and the enthusiasm that I have now for serving Spirit as a voice for Spirit. And when I say Spirit, I say that collectively, those who crossed over to the other side. And so I sought out some teachers from the Learning Light in Anaheim. Some of you may be familiar with that, and I studied with some well-known mediums. And I also became aware of my master spirit guide, Skawiyaka, which is Lakota for white feather. And so he started teaching me as well. And I started embracing it, and I started having more experiences. And so that led me to be of service in this capacity. And to bridge that gap between this lower earthly plane vibration and the higher spirit world vibration. So that's the bridge. Mediumship is the bridge between those two dimensions. And the spirit world, heaven, whatever you call that world, it overlays and interpenetrates this dimension. It's not some far off place floating on a cloud. It's right here. And they are right here. It's just the difference in the vibration. And so as a medium, I learned to elevate my vibration to meet them as they lowered theirs, and we met in the middle, middle. So when we meet in the middle, then they can use my mind temporarily, and they can communicate with me in that way. And you all have these abilities, like I said. It's just the extent of your awareness so that you can utilize them. So I sought out teachers, but also White Feather began teaching me even more. And then I stepped out into the public. I started doing private sessions by phone and in person, because it does not matter to them. That's the beauty of this service. of mediumship is that it's not bound by time and space, and neither are they now that they're out of the physical body. So I don't have to be physically there. The medium doesn't have to be physically there in order for the healing to take place, in order for this to happen, which is beautiful. So I stepped out onto the public platform, so to speak, in 2005 when I was living in Sedona of the East, I call it, Asheville, North Carolina. If you ever get a chance to go there, it is a very powerful place. And so I stepped out and started doing public platform work. And it's a joy and honor to do that so that I can reach more people. I would like to give everyone a message that's in the audience, but that's not possible in the time that I am at that high vibration to communicate with Spirit. So they're the ones that guide this and how it unfolds. And so I became even more passionate about serving Spirit in this capacity. And I started going across country and going to different cities. And I had the honor and privilege of the Spirit bringing me together with a grief director of a bereavement center in New Jersey. And so then she had a session with me. And it was a beautiful session. It was a pet mediumship session. Yes, I was talking with her rat, and her horses, and her cat, and her dogs. And so it's all consciousness. So they communicate with me in the same exact way. So I also serve those pets that have passed over so that they can let their loved ones know. And even in the demonstration today, I invite them, and sometimes a pet or two will come through as well. But so how is this a bridge to comfort, healing, and peace? I'd like to share with you some examples, some actual things that have happened where this was so evident. I was doing a public demonstration over at Kindred Spirits over in Claremont, down in the basin. And before this session, before the event, I always separate myself because I don't want anyone to think that I hear any information. And also I'm centering myself and I'm paying attention to Spirit because I know how to raise my awareness and to surrender my mind, my receptive mind, so that they can communicate with me. And so what happened was I came out and there was this man to my left. And his eyes were as red as a stop sign. And I could feel his pain and his grief. And so I came out and I saw him and I was talking about the process, which I'll do briefly at the demonstration this afternoon, and how they communicate with me by giving me things. I see things with my eyes open, and I hear things clairaudiently, and I feel, this is the one that really blows me away, I feel their pain. I feel the issues temporarily in my own body. And the way they do that is they are not possessing me. They are utilizing my mind and my nervous system. And they're able to stimulate my physical nervous system. So what happened was I told the man, I was interrupted by Spirit because Spirit was so anxious to get through to him. I told him, I said, don't worry, I'm coming to you first. And I will never forget this. And this soul, he's allowed me to share this information, this personal information. His name is Sebastian. And Sebastian, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me to allow people to understand that when we cross ourselves over, commit suicide, that we are embraced by the loving arms of God just as much as the others. And so what happened was, I'll make this brief because I've got a couple others that happened. So he needed to be comforted. And little did I know that he also needed to release himself, the Father. He needed also to, and this is the man that's in the physical with the red eyes, okay? he also needed to be released himself from guilt and blame and judgment. Because what happened was, this was his son, and his son showed up at my development circle the day before this mediumship demonstration. And he gave me a very intense pain in my head. So that it really got my attention. And I've learned to set boundaries with him. I'm not open 24/7. And so otherwise I would be in the loony farm. And so what happened was then he had me turn my wrists over, my hands over like this, and I'm able to look down and see into what they want to impress as images, and I saw both of my wrists lit. So this was on Saturday, okay? So this teenager, so then I turned my attention, I said, I know I need to listen to you. And so I did, and I said, please come back tomorrow if your loved one is going to be there. Well, to make a long story shorter, he came through with very specific information for his father, this teenager, his son. The day of the week that he passed, about the garden was significant. His dad said, well, the garden was where he did it. And that what happened was he slit his wrist and then he shot himself in the head. Okay, so my point in sharing this is no matter how upsetting, no matter how gruesome the passing, the cause that gets us over to the spirit world is, we are untouched. Our spirit is untouched. And many times they don't even feel the pain before they pass. So some of you may have had, because I was led to share this one, I share different ones, but some of you may have had, whether it's in your family or but in your social circle, someone who has crossed themselves over. So this is very important to know. So then his son told me to tell him that he influenced his television in a very profound way. And his dad just goes, oh my God, can I tell you? And I said, yes, go ahead. And that's what will happen in the demonstration too. Sometimes I'll ask for some context and then they will share. He said, I knew that was my son. He says, that night on our plasma screen TV, he said, when we turned the TV off, because his son did it in the afternoon, he said his handprints were glowing on the screen. So they can influence this physical world energetically, and they want to reach out and say hello to us. Now, where he was freed from and how he got comfort from this visit from his son was that his son had mentioned that it wasn't your fault, you couldn't have stopped me, and you needed to rest. His dad had been holding on to the guilt that he went and took a nap, and while his dad went to take a nap, his son went out and crossed himself over. So that is an example of the comfort and the healing and then the peace that you can experience through this mediumship, this process. I'd like to share one more, and this one was very impactful and also was very healing for the people that were involved. Now, it's not only the person, this man, who received that comfort, that healing, and that peace, but in a public demonstration, it's collective. Because then you know that your loved ones are just as alive and well, even though yours might not have come through specifically. So it's very beautiful. But the last one I'd like to share with you is I was doing a spirit circle, and that's a smaller group, over in Garden Grove at this place called the Owl's Lantern at that time. And this man's father came through, and he gave me a pain clairsentiently. That's where they can take control of my mind and create sensations. And I got a burning in my chest. And then clairvoyantly, I saw his chest being opened, okay? And then, so I was speaking this to his son, who was in the audience, was in the spirit circle, and his son tears were coming down his face. And then his father told me that there were 2 procedures and that he wanted his son to not blame himself. Here's where the real healing comes in. The man shared with me that, and with all of us, that he was the one that talked his father into having the second procedure, and the father passed during the second heart procedure. And this man had carried this guilt and this blame. And so now this mediumship had given him the comfort, the healing, and now he had come to peace with it. It wasn't his fault. So I could go on and on. There's so many ways that this can be a bridge to comfort, healing, and peace. And the same thing with the animals. They come through just as beautifully, just as clearly. So in closing, I want you to know that there is no death, as a lot of you already know. There is only life. And so I don't talk with the dead, I talk with the living in spirit. And it is with great gratitude and great love that I do so. And I am most grateful to all of you for this time with you so that I could share a little bit of my journey and share a little bit of how mediumship has blessed me and so many others. Thank you.